This didn't happen to me, but to my dad, and it's one of my favourite stories he tells. Some years ago, by which I mean 2 or so decades roughly, my dad was at a several day course to earn some additional qualifications for his job. On the final day, there was going to be a multiple choice test to actually pass the seminar. On test day, everyone got settled into place and the teacher announced that he would not go easy on cheaters. You had 1 strike to be caught trying to copy off someone else or use a cheat sheet, but if you were caught a second time, you would be immediately thrown out and your score would be made invalid. Now, this teacher was very old school strict and treated grown working people like unruly school children, and my dad does not like that very much. So my dad proceeds to take the test, and it goes pretty well. When he's through with the questions, there is just 1 left, when he's not sure he got it right. And he has a free strike after all. So my dad yells out into the class, just calls out, "What's the answer to question 14? And some complete bro elsewhere in the room yells the answer back. And my dad fills in this sheet, gets up, walks to the teacher's desk, presumably tries not to trip on the teacher's drawer as it lies on the floor, hands in his test, and leaves the room. Well, to the teacher's credit, he approached my dad afterwards with some begrudging respect. I don't know if he changed his policy afterwards, or the tone in which he conveyed it, but yeah. Alright, so one day at Tinker AFB, I got told to go and clean the smoke pit, smoking area. This is unusual because I am a non-smoker and it's not a mess which I contribute to in any fashion. Out of the squadron of about 1,000 people, I'm one of maybe 50 that doesn't use any sort of tobacco. No smoking, no dipping, and vaping wasn't allowed back in 2009/10. This Master Sergeant, one of the flight chiefs, came into the office and she tells me to go clean it. I'm reading a TO because I want to learn my aircraft, and I haven't done crap today. And nothing that would warrant me having to do that task again. Literally not my mess. The 50 of us that didn't smoke never had to clean it. For you non-military people, a Master Sergeant is senior enlisted. Been in for a minimum of 10 to 12 years. Edit for anyone wondering, a TO is a technical order, not only the instructions for nearly every possible repair on the aircraft, but also legal orders that maintainers are required to follow to the letter. I look over to my sergeant and just tell him, do you want to tell them? He nods and goes to talk with the flight chiefs. He's a non-smoker too, and was also a pretty poo-hot dude, so he comes back in about 2 minutes later. Okay, come on, let's go clean up the smoke pit. Well, crap, at least I won't be alone. Now, me and Staff Sergeant H get out to the smoke pit with brooms and dustpans, and there are weeks of butts piled in and around the cans. Lots of work, would take forever, even with the big push brooms we've gotten to do this. I turn to Sergeant H and sigh resignedly, "Hey, do we have a pressure washer?" Sergeant H nods and walks off. I get started. Sergeant H comes back with the pressure washer and we start it up, and take it to the floor of the smoke pit. Immediately, a spray of brown tar water shoots up off the ground from the washer. The floor, once a uniform mottled brown to black even coating, is revealed as being pure light grey cement, the colour of freshly poured cement. This floor had never been painted. This was years, if not decades of tar and smoke we were washing away. The one little floor drain in the smoke pit cannot keep up with this. The smoke pit was walled in on 2 sides, and on the open 2 sides you step down into it. Tables and ash cans were the decoration, as well as some of the Reagan era posters about the expansion of USAF. We begin to flood the pit because the poor little shower drain in the floor just can't keep up with the volume from the pressure washer. We take it nice and slow, but now we've learned how dirty it all is. Pressure washing inch by inch, step by step. The flood of cigarette butts accumulate at the drain, and we're scooping them up with the dustpan and depositing them in trash bags. By this point, we've emptied the pit. After about 30 minutes of this, the flight chiefs come out to have a smoke, and they stare at this nasty swamp we've made of the smoke pit. Their faces fall, and smokes go back into the pocket. They don't say anything, they just go back inside, defeated that their orders prevented them from grabbing a smoke. The smokers would have just swept half-heartedly and emptied the cans. Non-smokers that got screwed? Pressure wash. I have quite a few malicious compliance stories from working as a chef for many years now, so I'll throw a couple of them at you guys. 1. A guy who added mushrooms to his salmon BLT. So this guy would always add mushrooms, and we don't have an add mushroom option on the menu, but yeah, we have mushrooms in the house, so yes, we can technically do it. I'm familiar with the guy, he comes in for lunch usually. My AM, sous chef, is much more compassionate than I am. Also, she does half the amount of food sales for lunch than what I pull in a dinner shift. She usually sautés the mushrooms for his sandwich. Homeboy comes in during the middle of a slammed dinner rush for his bacon/mushroom BLT. My restaurant serves food to the dining room in the bar, basically another dining room which is connected to the same building, and a concert venue that is connected through the backside, but operates as a separate entity. I have 50 plus tickets on fire, and I see him at the counter, and I heard him say it. "Yes, I'll have 1 salmon BLT, and can I add mushrooms on that?" Sure, there'll be no problem. I put raw sliced mushrooms on a sandwich. He never specified that he wanted cooked mushrooms. I usually am not this thick-headed, but when I'm trying to focus on literally 50 other things, sauteing your stupid mushrooms is detracting from the food quality of 50 other people whose dishes require equal attention. It's not fair to them. I now prep a small handful of sauteed mushrooms beforehand for when this guy comes in. He also specifies cooked mushrooms. Number 2. Burned bacon arsehole. Different customer, same sandwich. That stupid salmon BLT. So this guy came in and ordered the salmon BLT, extra crispy bacon. So I throw a couple pieces of bacon in the fryer. They are crisped to perfection. Send the sandwich out, move on. Couple minutes later, the waitress comes back holding the BLT. He said the bacon wasn't crispy enough. I'm like, alright. The health department policy is that I'm not allowed to touch food that's been handled by customers, so I proceed to make him an entirely new sandwich. This time I take a little more care in ensuring the bacon is in fact very crispy. Well, this butthole sends it back again, and I've had enough of this crap. I take 2 pieces of bacon, put them in a pan, and throw them under the salamander. Basically like a broiler for you non-restaurant folk. Left it under there till I smelled something burning. I didn't know this, but if you heat bacon past 500 degrees, it becomes kind of like a liquid. I tilted the pan, poured this blackish sludge on his sandwich. When it touched the rest of the sandwich, the sludge sort of seized up and became crispy, kind of similar to charcoal. I sent out the 3rd sandwich, and to my disbelief, he ate it. He had quite the sour look on his face. Maybe he was too embarrassed to request sandwich number 4. Number 3, the pizza with only cheese. This story is more about a butthole bar manager, but it wasn't really the customer's fault. So first I need to explain that the restaurant owner had this crappy, greedy idea that they would remove the cheese pizza from the menu. The cheese pizza was our cheapest pizza on the menu behind the pepperoni. The idea was that now, if somebody wants to order a cheese pizza, they have to order a pepperoni pizza without pepperoni. Also, they still pay the full price for the pepperoni pizza. Now I'll explain the bar manager, Brian. Brian is a giant hipster. Square, black-rimmed glasses, greasy comb-over, sleeves of crappy tattoos, gauged earlobes, etc. We've had our many conflicts in the past. He berated one of my younger cooks for messing up this guy's custom salad order once. I usually don't let someone discipline my cooking staff, but this happened when I was at home. I heard about it later. There's something about, "You guys need to read your tickets more carefully and do exactly as I say." Oh yeah? Okay, we can do that. Saturday night, Brian is slammed behind the bar. Rings in an order for pepperoni pizza, cheese only. Yes, we knew exactly what that meant. I stopped my pizza cook before he ladled the sauce onto the pizza. It says cheese only. What if they're allergic to tomatoes? The pizza goes out. Brian comes back fuming. "Oh, you guys think this is real freaking funny, hey?" All my cooks are cracking up. Me, firmly. "You need to be more specific when you ring in your tickets, lest we do exactly as they say. And another thing, if you ever yell at one of my cooks, I'll freaking cut you." I pointed my 10-inch chef knife at him. Brian retweets, brilliant. Brian retreats back to the bar, all while yelling about how HR was going to hear about this. Yeah, that crap almost got me fired, but I plan on leaving that job pretty soon anyway. In the end, no disciplinary action was taken over the pizza misconception, but I received a write-up for threatening a staff member. I spent my last few months there making Brian's life a living hell. I hear he got fired a few years ago. Not now, but actually almost 20 years ago when I was in 8th grade. My history teacher, whom I'll call Mr. Bojangles here, assigned us a group, about 5 people each, project where we had to make a film we all had to be in and that we would present to the class. 2 of the people in my group expressed they were uncomfortable being on film and even more uncomfortable with that film being on display to the class. They proposed, and the other 3 of us in the group agreed, to Mr. Bojangles that they take part off camera and we find volunteers to stand and perform their parts. Again, we were fine with this and respected their discomfort. Even if we didn't understand it, he practically laughed in our faces and rejected it. I was never a particularly agreeable kid, and since they didn't want to fail, I wanted to at least make something he wouldn't show. We knew we would get in trouble for any number of age-inappropriate things, so we had to be creative about it. Now, a while back, Mr. Bojangles had been asked what part of town he lived in, and he refused to say. Someone just said his name was uncommon enough, and we should look him up in the phone book. He said they'd never find him because he's listed under an alias. I distinctly remembered how he said it, like he was super clever. The dude's an idiot, so I looked him up and found him under alias Bojangles. So one Saturday morning, bright and early, camera running, my group knocked on his door, and he answered in a bathrobe and saw the camera, and it told us to leave him alone. We then waited until a school day and skipped school so we could film in his front yard undisturbed. Being the gutsiest, dumbest one in the group, I volunteered to hand him the tape. I smiled at him as I did it and told him that it's really good and we worked super hard, and he's gonna love it. He watched it before he showed it to the class, and opted not to show it. Fine, perfect. Except he took it a step further. He failed the group and tried to get me expelled. They called my mum in to discuss, and he said that we'd broken the rules. She asked how we had broken the rules, since it sounded like the film met all the parameters given. He said we hadn't shown it to the class. My mum, who already knew the game, feigned shock and asked if it had been our decision. It hadn't. She asked if there had been any nudity or profanity. There hadn't. Once Bojangles finally said that we'd filmed it in his yard, she asked how we got his address, and noted that it's pretty inappropriate to give students his address. I told her, he told us exactly what to look for in the phone book to find him. Mr. Bojangles conceded to have the other history teacher, whose class had the same assignment, to grade it, as long as I promised to never show up at his house again. Duh, dude, making a point. Our group got an A, for alias, I assume. Okay, so I was an aircraft mechanic in the US Air Force, and I was a flight line guy. One day we had to drive the launch truck across base, using the roads. Launch trucks are these blue cargo trucks/vans with a large box on the back where up to 18 people can sit. There are 2 benches along the walls with no seatbelts, and hard metal, plywood all around, and toolboxes of varying sizes. And driving on the military base, you go the posted speed limit, no faster, especially in a military vehicle, because those are orders. Anyway, I had my flightline driving license, so I'm the one driving the 7 of us or so across the base, and the highest ranking guy, a senior airman, 3 stripes, E4, SRA, is riding shotgun with me. He gets to have the AC because he's the highest ranking. I'm driving about 20 miles per hour with a posted speed limit of 25. I know that these trucks suck as a passenger when you're going that fast, and I'm taking corners super slowly on a windy road, maybe 12 or 15 miles per hour. SRA, geez man, you drive like my grandmother, drive a little faster, and for God's sake don't take corners so slow. Yes sir, I had 1 or 2 stripes on my arm, I was outranked, the precise number didn't matter. Okay, cool. And then me, seeing the next corner come up, take it at 25 miles per hour, sharply. All 5 in the back get thrown to the other side of the truck, toolboxes crash, it's a general pandemonium back there. Everyone okay? Everyone sounds off, they're all okay. Jesus Christ man, what the hell? You ordered me not to drive slow and careful, sir. I was joking, and I've been written up for thinking people were joking before. SRA is silent for the rest of the trip. Last summer, I worked as an ice cream vendor on the beach of my hometown. Best job I ever had. People were nice to me, I got to work in my tan, it paid pretty well, but most importantly, we were allowed to eat the delicious ice cream in our breaks. One day, I'm serving a man and his son. The man orders a cone with 2 scoops for him and a cone with 1 scoop for the little one. The kid wasn't happy about that and said to his dad that he also wanted 2 scoops. The dad explains that the scoops were pretty big and 1 will suffice for him. I confirm this to help the dad, even offering to make it extra big. Still, the kid doesn't budge. Instead, he starts throwing a tantrum, nearly crying about how he wanted 2 scoops. The dad, clearly not wanting to ruin his vacation mood, gives up and says the kid can have 2 scoops. However, he adds, if you can't finish your ice cream like I said you wouldn't, no more TV for you for the rest of the vacation. The kid happily agrees, claiming he could eat a whole tub of ice cream. Big mistake, kid. Me, being the petty person that I am, wanted to teach this brat a lesson. I proceed by scooping one of the most gigantic scoops I've ever scooped in my entire scooping career. I put it on the cone, and the kid's eyes widen in shock. My scoop goes back for more. I see the kid tremble in disbelief. I scoop the second most gigantic scoop a scooper could scoop, and graciously add it to the first one.
I'll let you know every time I use my garbage can. I've never met anyone that said, oh good, an HOA. We all have trash cans, but the sight of them offends the delicate eyes of some. So, I complied with the new rule of no seeing bins from the street. I find a notice of my bins being out, which is surprising because I'm the only one who touches the cans and I know I'm 100% compliant. I call in and ask why I got the notice. The full description says, bins in driveway with lids off. I asked if this happened to be a Tuesday, and sure enough it was. Wednesday is pickup, and I was doing my weekly cleaning. I was using them. I calmly explained through gritted teeth. Oh, okay, I'll remove the notice. Great, but how do I prevent this from happening again? Oh, I guess notify us. All right, I said, I'll notify you every time I'm using my trash cans. Oh, that won't be necessary. Clearly, it is. That was 5 Tuesdays ago. Today, I once again called promptly at 10 o'clock and let Alan know I was about to use my trash cans. You know what, Mr. Endelman? I'm just gonna put a hold on any trash can notices for you. Oh, that would be swell, Alan. That would be swell. Yeah, HOAs are absolute garbage, and they belong in those bins. I got a trash can ticket in the mail. The photo showed me actively pulling weeds, and the trash can was rolled over by me where I was throwing the weeds away. Gotta love HOAs. Wait, you called him at 10 every Tuesday for 6 weeks straight? Hey, you gotta be compliant after all. Think about it. Today, I once again called promptly at 10 o'clock. Why call so late? I would have called them on my way to the office at 5:30 a.m. Next Tuesday, you should call him again. Not to inform him that you're once again using your bins, but just to confirm that he did indeed put a hold on the trash can notices, just to be sure. Oh yeah, never trust them on their initial word. He either immediately forgot or was just trying to get you to shut up. I once received a warning letter from my HOA that the blades of grass on my lawn were above the allowable 4-inch maximum length. That was the day I wish I had the superpower of being able to mail an outgoing punch to someone's face. My lawn was green and weed-free, but the line was drawn at the height of grass blades. Sometimes I want to skip a week of mowing. Me for taking a week off. The HOA before that, my dogs were barking too loudly at night. They never responded to my reply email that I don't own dogs or pets of any kind. One of my neighbors manifested invisible dogs and placed them onto my property and blamed me for my inability to control their natural behavior. That was the day I wish I had the superpower of being able to punch a neighbor through drywall. Again, HOAs are trash. When we were looking for our house, an HOA was an instant no. We would absolutely not move into a place that had a homeowners association. They're abusive and scary, and they can even send you to frickin' prison, and in some cases, no joke, they can completely foreclose on your home. In some more rare cases, it is possible, and they have done it to people. I posted this before, but I was at a buddy's until around 10 p.m. one night. I left, but I was back pretty early the next morning. Someone assumed my truck was parked in the driveway overnight. He got a crappy warning letter. It seems to give some of those board members joy to be petty. You can't have a friend or an overnight visitor? No cars overnight in the driveway. Wow. Imagine purchasing a piece of property in which you're purchasing the land that property sits on, and a bunch of 80-year-olds get pissy at you because it doesn't look like they want it to look. It's not your house. Go f*** yourself. Not even to mention that HOAs can cost hundreds to even thousands of dollars extra per month to be a part of, depending on how shitty they are. HOAs are run by people who couldn't qualify running for local government. Exactly. Or they're just stupid and really need to abuse and control people. I moved out and took everything. It became apparent to me last week that my roommates were trying to drive me out of the house to get one of their boyfriends in on my lease. When I told them I wanted to stay, they started staging incidents and messes around the house so they could yell at me for them, and it all came to a head when they called a meeting with me 2 days ago. One of them had to hold the other back as she screamed at me that she hated me and I was not welcome in the building. They proceeded to tell me that I contributed nothing to the house and wasted their space, and that they had gotten in with the landlady and convinced her not to renew my lease in June. I told them I'd talked to the landlady, and when they said they were the heads of the house, I laughed and went on with my day. I spoke to the landlady, and she acknowledged that they were out of hand, and while she had given them the power to not renew my lease, she also said I could move out whenever and not pay for a single day I wasn't there. So, when my roommates both left to visit family, their sisters, I immediately called everyone I knew and vacated the house of everything I owned. I took the curtains, the rugs, all the cat toys, even the cat tower that I had made with my mom. I took all of their things off of my shelves and other furniture and stacked them in the middle of the now nearly empty living room. I snapped pictures of everything, handed the keys to the landlady, and immediately screwed off. They won't be back in the house until tomorrow. I blocked them on everything so I won't get any angry messages, but I'm sure their faces will be priceless when they come home to a half-empty house with hundreds of dollars in storage and furniture gone. So much for the not contributing anything to the house bit. Now I actually don't. They also have to find someone else to take up the lease till boyfriend can move in and June comes around, or when June comes around, or they have to pick up my rent. Feels pretty good. Note, I have updated this post. It is my newest comment. Get a lease release in writing from the landlady. Include exemption from rent. That is always a good point. I actually did that at my first apartment because we were not renewing the lease. We wanted to make sure they knew that. I went down and I said, can we get something in writing from you? And she was like, I'll try, but it's good that we did get it just in case. I don't trust landlords or the companies they work through. Good on you for not putting up with abuse. Post back with texts if they contact you. My neighbor did this. I came home to find he and his family emptying the apartment of all his property. The couple he was living with were terrible to him. The screams I heard that evening when they got home and found the kitchen table, chairs, couch, TV, etc. all gone was hilarious. Did this with a roommate. Despite me contributing with the majority of rent, helping pay their car, and paying for the majority of utilities and bills, plus owning any furniture that wasn't in their room, I was somehow the leech. Had the biggest smile on my face when I left the unit for the final time, and it looked like no one even lived there. Oh, did we not get an update? Did we not get an update on that? Oh, I was so looking forward to it. What do you mean I can't drive my car? I've been a mechanic my entire working life so far, and this is one of my favorite experiences. I had a customer come in complaining about a vibration. I put the vehicle on the lift and checked the front end. I found a nearly broken tie rod and a faulty rack and pinion. Pinion? So basically, the passenger side front wheel was not fully secured to the steering system and would soon break and cause the wheel to be completely disconnected from the steering. I told the customer how much the repair would be and told her it was unsafe to drive. She asked me to put it back together so she could leave. I told her that I could not do that because if it broke after I let her leave, I could be held liable. She started yelling and screaming about calling the cops and suing me and how her cousin's brother knows a guy who's related to the chief of police and I'll be arrested. She calls the police and they come out. I show the officers the vehicle, and they understood the safety concern. They told me to just put the car down and let her leave. I did, and even made her sign a statement declining crucial safety repairs. Good. She left with the most haha I told you so smug grin on her face until she left the property, got pulled over, and her car impounded. They also gave her a ticket for reckless driving. I was so happy seeing her car get towed. Edit for clarification. The cops told her it was against the law to drive it. The state laws back then allowed me to do exactly what I did. I offered to discount the price of the repair and take payments, and she still refused. And I don't care how well versed you think you are in the law. You don't know when or where this took place. And no, I won't tell you what state I'm in because I've already had several people message me saying they're going to try and find my shop just to harass and blast me. Which is kinda weird, because you are correct, right? Was it the same cops that told you to release the car waiting just off property to impound the car? Or was it more coincidence? I was hoping this was the outcome. I guess her cousin's brother's friend's chief can help her get those cops fired for giving her a ticket. Did her car come back to get fixed? No. Unfortunately, I never got the satisfaction of seeing her so I could say I told you so. So the cops had to wait till her car left the premises to impound her vehicle? That seems odd, doesn't it? Restaurant employee amuses himself. Delights me and my kids. Yesterday, I decided to take my kids to an international chain restaurant. In this restaurant, the kids' meal comes with ice cream, but you have to serve yourself. That was a problem because there weren't any bowls beside the ice cream machine. So I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll simply ask an employee for some bowls. So that's just what I did. So he turns to look at a vast array of bowls behind him. Some sauce-sized, some entree salad-sized, and many in between. And we realized that neither of us knows what size the kids' ice cream is intended to be. So he thought, I know what to do. I'll simply ask a manager. And he says, hey boss, what do we put the kids' ice cream in? Without turning around, the boss says, a f***ing bowl. What do you think? Yeah, but what size bowl? The boss, with his inimitable charm, tact, and grace, says, just give him a bowl. Again, that guy should be fired. Kid. The employee looked back at the bowls, and then I saw him get a big grin over his face. I apologize about that, sir. I think it's probably these ones, he says, as he hands me two of the largest bowls they have in the restaurant, practically giggling with glee. My children were similarly delighted. The manager walked by when we were halfway through and made a noise like a startled opossum, but said no actual words. Definitely going back there. I hope that dude doesn't... Not the regular employee. I hope the manager doesn't work there anymore. I worked at a McDonald's in high school, and my favorite thing to do was create a freaking gigantic kids cone. You'd have to get a wide base to start with, but if you got the foundation set, you could make a cone almost as big as a regular one. Whenever folks would come in, obviously high and ordering a ton of food, I'd always ask them if they wanted a free kids cone. Seeing their eyes light up when I'd build a giant cone was always hilarious. You're my favorite type of person. Like a startled, is it a possum or just possum? Or are they two different things? I don't know. I'd like to know how you know what that sounds like. Look, if you ever leave cat food out on your front porch and walk out in the middle of the night to get something from your car, you'll learn what it sounds like. Also, you learn if you're a flight or fight type of person. Or, saying it that way sounds kind of weird. Fight or flight. That employee is awesome. Don't let the assholes bring you down. What a crappy manager. His manager could barely believe what happened. That was terrible. Well done. You want a man to help you? No problem. One will clock in soon. This happened 16 years ago. When I was about 20 years old, I was a department manager in a big box hardware store. People said I acted 25, but I didn't even look 18. As a young female, I saw a fair amount of sexual discrimination, but the worst always came from women. This is the story of one such woman. I managed the paint department. I had 3 associates who worked for me. They loved me as a boss because I bought them a department radio? What? Whatever. Took the shifts they didn't want, etc. Worked Friday, close, and Saturday midday, so my 2 younger guys could have time off or have fun on Friday nights, and the older gentlemen took early Saturday mornings so they could sleep off their fun. In trade, I gave the older gentleman his ideal schedule. My team was awesome. One day I was in the department alone and a lady came up and asked me where she could find the 5-gallon oil-based primer. I let her know that my location didn't carry the 5-gallon size of the primer. She told me that we did and said it was shelved right there while suggesting I was too stupid to remember. Her husband gave me an apologetic look. I let her know that another location had what she was looking for and that it was in fact in that exact location in that store. She let me know how stupid she thought I was for thinking she could mix up stores. Then she began yelling and loudly insisting that I get a man out there to help her because she wanted someone competent and not a stupid little girl. Her husband actually tried to step in at that point, but I just smiled and let her know that a male paint associate would be clocking in any minute and that I would be happy to direct him to her as soon as he's on the clock. I smiled and waited for Joe to clock in. Joe was great, and I knew he could handle this or I wouldn't have put him in this situation. But Joe was also new. He was learning things very quickly, but still relied on the rest of us for help. When I saw Joe walking up, I quickly said that there was a customer who needed help. I let him know that she was upset and asked him to do his best to answer her questions. Joe walked up to the lady. She said, "Finally, a man." She asked her question, explained where the product should be, and waited. Joe calmly let her know that he had never seen us carry a 5-gallon size of oil-based primer, but said that he could check with the paint department manager. She was happy and loudly said she was finally happy to get some real help. Joe walked up to me and started to ask me about 5-gallon oil-based primers. The lady quickly walked up and asked him what he was doing. He turned and said, "This is my manager. She runs this department." The husband laughed out loud and the woman stormed off. And I bought Joe lunch. Man, they seem like they're in a great relationship, right? That husband, they shouldn't be together. I don't care how old they are. This is, God, what a miserable person. I loved it when I was working and people refused my help because I'm a woman. I worked at GameStop. Anytime they'd demand my store manager, I would go get her with glee. She was a 50-plus-year-old woman who didn't even really play games, which meant that not only did they have to deal with a different woman, they were losing 20-plus years gaming experience. That's a cool way to put it, actually. I managed a menswear store. Didn't matter how old the man I was working with was. Could be a part-time high school kid. People always went up to him first. Or straight up refused my help, stating they'd prefer a man. We call it guy in a tie syndrome. Well played, OP. Any bets on how long the husband was sleeping on the couch after that? Oh man, he's probably still sleeping there to this day. You should have had Joe say, "I'm sorry, ma'am, perhaps I should just deal with your husband on this matter." Oh, that would have been the chef's kiss. Look, if she's in there demanding to be helped by a man, then why wouldn't you be able to say, well, I'd rather talk to your husband because he's a man. Just throw that back in her frickin' face. She painted herself into a corner by demanding a man and assuming you weren't knowledgeable. Yup, automated my useless boss out of their job. This happened a few years ago. I was a data and reporting analyst and did all the ad hoc reports for the company. My boss, we'll call her Carrie, was useless. She was one of those people that was always late, left early, took days off at short notice. The only thing of value she did was all the regular reports, sales, revenue, etc. We suspected she got away with it because she was having an affair with her boss. We'll call him Stuart. Our CEO was a fairly decent bloke. He'd look out for ways to cut costs and would pay regular bonuses for the best cost-saving initiatives. Carrie was very keen to submit ideas and encouraged us all to automate our tasks so that she could try and take the credit for the savings. One of her skive days, which coincidentally Stuart was sick, as well, the CEO was desperate for the sales report. My boss does. Wow, this reads kind of weird. I'm sorry. I'm an idiot. Don't worry. I said I'd give it a look and see if I could get it done. Normally, she'd spend 2 to 3 days doing it each week, but the CEO wanted it that afternoon. A quick inspection of the data showed it would be quite easily automated, so I knocked up the necessary script and got it over to the CEO, who was super impressed that not only had I gotten it done in a couple of hours, but also that it could be updated whenever he needed it. He asked if I could also look at the revenue, churn, and a couple of other reports. Over that afternoon, I automated everything my boss did. Both Carrie and Stuart were back in the next day, but were immediately summoned to the CEO's office before being suspended and sent home. Turns out the CEO knew they were having an affair, and all the times they were sick or late, or had to leave early, was so they could sneak off and do it. He'd not done anything about it because of how important these reports were. Now that they were automated, he was able to get them suspended and later fired for gross misconduct for all the time they'd taken off. I also got a nice bonus out of it. TLDR, my useless boss encouraged us to automate our work, so I automated all her tasks and the CEO fired her for it. Go away or I will replace you with a very small shell script. I've got good news and bad news, CEO. The good news is I've automated the sales report and revenue report using bots. The bad news is the sales report bot is now having an affair with the revenue report bot. Oh, best part was the CEO recognized your work and gave you a bonus. Saved him a buttload of money for 2 employees. Look, I hope that bonus is actually good, because if they save $1 trillion but they give you $20, I hope it was decent. We had a secretary at work. The nurses would nicely ask her to do things like make copies or send faxes while she was busy shopping online and gossiping with the housekeepers. She would snap that it wasn't her job. I asked her what was her job and advised that she should be a bit more careful on how often she said that. I think she got the drift. Things mildly improved for a bit. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't know what secretaries frickin' do, honestly. I would love to see tutorials on this sort of thing. YouTube, a potential spicy section of Skillshare or whatever. I think people would pay for potential constructive revenge skills videos. A bar near me found a hilarious loophole to get around noise complaints and keep hosting live music. Oh boy. A bar in my town used to host live bands all the time, until one of the neighbors complained about the noise. Turns out the zoning rules didn't allow them to have live music and they almost got shut down. The bar owner read over said zoning rules and noticed that the wording forbade them to have live music indoors, but they could have it outdoors. So they moved the stage to the patio section where it would be even louder for the neighbors and still be legal. They still have live music sometimes, but not nearly as often as they used to. Don't want to push their luck, I guess. Yeah, to be as fair as possible to the people that would complain about the noise, I guess it depends on the time of day you're at home. Are you trying to go to sleep? Because I think that would be really fucking awful to live next to a place that can not only be incredibly loud, even if it's indoors, but man, moving it outdoors, ooh, I would absolutely hate living next to a place like that, especially because it's probably expensive to live next to a place like that. Reminds me of Las Vegas. People move in and start complaining about the billboards of scantily dressed women that perform at the hotel shows. But the children, they'll see it. Welcome to Sin City. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. They changed the slogan, what happens here only happens here. Really? People make the same complaints when they move to the country. Oh, you bought a parcel from the family dairy farm that's been there for 100 years and you don't like the smell of cow shit and dirt from the roads or the tractors? Guess it's time to sue the farmer into oblivion. Luckily, a lot of places have the right to farm law, but it still doesn't stop Karen and Dave from complaining at every town board meeting. Funnily enough, the opposite thing happened to my parents at their restaurant. They weren't allowed to have music inside for a bat mitzvah. Is it bat mitzvah? I think so. Anyway, so they had speakers at the window aiming inside. I don't know the reasoning for the rule, but they still had to watch the decibels the whole time. Sounds like a real asshole. They'll change the rules and shut him down anyway. Oh, I'm sure someone would bitch enough about it, as is tradition. Look, just because I would be super annoyed by noise, it seems like they actually weren't trying to disturb people and be assholes, but it's kind of like the Streisand effect, Maybe if you just don't frickin' mention it, people won't come after you more about it. It's very strange. Anyway, let's move on. I work at a university, and all of the faculty complain that their students don't turn on their cameras. And then we have a departmental meeting, and none of those turn their cameras on. Well, you know what? Suck it! I mean, what else can be said? Funny and sad how you have to shame people to make a point. Glad you were able to retain your dignity while making a point. Kudos and congratulations! Congratulations!
I'm a small-time landlord with just 4 tenants. Earlier this year, I had 2 sisters that didn't respond to my request to add the gal's husband to the lease, though she was living with them. Not a big deal, but I did mention the pit bull they also brought home. Without permission, I do allow pets and had previously approved their other dog. I asked nicely in person and by email in the months leading up to the malicious compliance. They also did not respond when I asked if they were happy there and wanted to renew their lease for the following year. I asked again, then I emailed them notice that I would start showing the unit 2 days later. I try to be a nice landlord. I do. They had a newborn as well, so I scheduled all of the showings within a 2-hour window on the same night so I could be in the space as little as possible. Also, because they had not responded and it was now serious crunch time for getting another tenant, and my spouse worked all following 2 weeks during evening showing hours, I had the delightful inconvenience of bringing my 2 and 6-year-old children with me to the showings. Because I'm not a corporation, I'm a small-time family landlord with kids. Try to imagine how difficult it is to conduct business meetings with 2 kids, right? Then imagine the staggering showings every 15 minutes with prospective tenants who are also bringing their own kids. Just to further clutter your imagination, this is an 800 square foot, 2-bedroom apartment with a cozy entryway, so I arrive with my 2 kids to find that my tenants are still home, along with the husband, the newborn, and the other sister's boyfriend. So that's 7 people in a small kitchen already. Then the first prospective tenants start arriving. Husbands, wives with kids, and some showing up early, so there's 2 sets of them. That's 14 people in a small kitchen. And I'm a mum. I have magical powers, so I'm holding my toddler. My daughter is safely under the dining table colouring, and I'm chatting with the prospective tenants and directing traffic while my actual tenants prepare to depart. If you didn't know this already, it's common practice in the US to leave the premises during real estate or apartment showings. This was their first apartment, so I actually emailed them ahead of time to let them know what's generally expected at showings, e.g. a relatively tidy apartment, and that they can leave for their own convenience. They do eventually leave, after the boyfriend tells the prospective tenant that he, in fact, also lives there, and I can carry on with an exhausting schedule of showings, and have my new tenants all picked out and the lease signed by the next day. Awesome, right? The next night, I get a voicemail from the husband, who is not my tenant. I saved it and just listened to it again because it still gives me the same delightful shiver of malicious compliance. In his voicemail, he told me how awful it was that my children touched his infant's things. They didn't, because I keep my kids entertained with magical mummy toys, but prospective tenants also brought children, and how they had to sterilize everything to keep their infant from being sick, and how inconvenient it was to have showings with only 2 days notice, and how very unprofessional I was to bring my children, and asked if I could be more professional in the future. You can hear it, can't you? The deep shiver of malicious compliance vibrating through my offended being. The next morning, I started issuing professional lease violation notices. One for the extra residents of the unit, hubby and boyfriend, one for extra dog, and a few additional ones for building concerns I noted during the showings. They ignored the violation notice, which I sent by certified mail, and thoughtfully also by email. I decided to get even more professional 30 days later, and issue a 5-day notice to vacate. And I called their mum, who is their emergency contact, as an eviction notice is an emergency. Did I mention that their lease was due to end just a few weeks later? But it would be unprofessional of me to let these violations slide until then. 3 days later, they'd magically sent me all the information I requested, removed the other dog, licensed the first dog, gotten the required pet insurance. They moved out on their lease termination date and skipped out in the last electric bill, and left the unit in damaged condition. Despite my professional security deposit disposition statement and request for payment, they ignored those notices, until I stated that I would proceed to small claims court by X date for the total due beyond their security deposit. On X date, they replied stating that they didn't think it was fair that they would have to cover damages to their unit, or pay any more money towards their utility bill. Yep, 2 months later, there we were in the lobby of the courthouse, sitting across from each other on uncomfortable waiting room benches. They're laughing amongst themselves about how they're going to get their full security deposit back, and I'm quietly reviewing my presentation notes to the judge and my sizable stack of evidence. Photographs, videos. This was my first time in court, but I wasn't laughing. I was preparing. 1 hour later, we're back in the lobby and their mum is trying to write me a check for the full amount of the judgment. She doesn't have a pen, her kids don't have a pen. I, however, have a pen. I cheerfully offer my pen, she writes the check and hands it to me. And wait, I hold out my hand again. I got my pen back too. I was so proud of myself for not saying any of the sassy things in my head at that moment. You know why? Because I was being professional. As I've been from the moment he left that voicemail. As a last note, I do acknowledge that it would have been better if I hadn't brought my children. However, if you have kids, you'll understand that sometimes they simply have to go where you go. And not my story, but a friend's. He had a professor in college who would occasionally go on a rant about how some of the items from Taco Bell
don't even technically classify as food by some standards.
Though not often, it was a passionate rant. The day after one of his rants, a student brought in a bag of food from Taco Bell. The professor objected.
There is no food allowed in my classroom.
The student held up the bag to show the logo and said, "Oh, don't worry, it's not food." He took a bite of a taco whilst maintaining eye contact. After a moment of surprise, the teacher admitted defeat with a polite but disgusted nod. The next day, he directed the students' attention to a revised syllabus, specifically the new rule, no food or Taco Bell allowed at any time in the classroom. Given that the class was Introduction to Law, the teacher gave him extra credit. Hey guys, I'm a floor manager at a busy fast fashion retailer. I've posted about my poo-head supervisor in a few places, but basically, she's the worst person I've ever worked with. Was supposed to train me in my FM role, and has done sweet FA for 6 months, and is such a wee-wee to me that I'm transferring stores and states in a week to get away from her. Anyhow, a part of my job at the moment is training new managers in the admin side of the business. I used to be the admin manager at my old store, so I'm the one who knows the most about it, and am qualified to train people. This means I have to be off the shop floor for most days this week, conducting training sessions where I teach the managers how to do all the shop admin and the security rules, etc. My supervisor has been complaining non-stop about me not being on the floor to help her, ignoring the fact that our store manager has explicitly instructed me to spend as much time in the office as possible. Yesterday, she was being pooier than usual, given my Saturday clothes wasn't up to her standards. I was trying to train this poor girl in the office, and my supervisor kept coming in and asking us when we'd be done, and if she could get our help with stuff. After 1 hour in the office, we were supposed to have 6 of the 8 hours of our shift dedicated to training. She drops in and tells me that we'll have to move the training to tomorrow because she needs us right now on the floor. I explain as patiently as I can that I already have training planned for tomorrow and there's no time right now to do it. She refuses to listen, so I ask for half an hour just to get essential admin done for her day. She orders me and the trainee out of the office and says she'll deal with it. Now, I knew that she wasn't going to do any of the admin. She never does because she's not good at it and thinks it's boring. I also knew that because it was a Sunday, all the employees' hours for the week had to be confirmed and finalized in the office computer so payroll could, pay everyone. So every hour, I radio her asking if I can go back into the office to do the admin. After the 3rd hour, she snaps and says not to remind her again, she's going to do it. I comply. Myself and the trainee had started early, so our shift ended about 2 hours before the shop closed. As I was leaving, I poked my head into the office. The unfinished shop reports were still sitting on the desk, and the payroll sheets still hadn't been processed, not to mention a bunch of other stuff hadn't been done. I might have warned the supervisor that this all needed to be done by the end of the day, but she's already told me not to remind her, so I go home without saying anything. Cut to this morning, I arrive at work before 9 and my store manager is running the morning meeting, the key focus of which is her apologizing to staff because the payroll didn't get closed the night before. The staff are understandably annoyed. The store manager takes me aside after the meeting and asks me what the hell happened yesterday and why I didn't do any of the payrolls, security checks, reporting, or communication with head office. I tell her that my supervisor refused to let me train my trainee or do anything in the office, and that she explicitly told me she would deal with it. My boss goes very quiet and thanks me for telling her. My supervisor rolls in at 10 AM and immediately gets called into the store manager's office. They shut the door, but from the admin office, it's pretty easy to hear what's going on. And my god, our boss laid into her so hard. The store manager called her behavior childish and ridiculous, and she said a few times that she couldn't understand why my supervisor would think that she knows more than I do about store admin, given that she never paid attention in her own admin training. I was just twirling around in a spinny chair, enjoying listening to the rampage. Eventually, the supervisor comes out of the office, clearly crying. She does this a lot when she wants to get away, so no one really felt sorry for her, and then tried to claim she was too emotional to work and needed to go home. But I guess the store manager stepped in on that one too, because she was present and fuming all day today. I was excused from all floor support for the next few days in order to make up for the hours I lost yesterday. Amazing day. I work in a school library, right? We rent out chargers for phones and laptops upon request for a few hours, but they have relatively steep fines for being returned late. Usually I waive the fines, especially if it's returned less than an hour after it was due. In comes one guy, let's call him H, who is a serial laptop charger renter, almost every day. Well, a few days ago, he accidentally brought the charger home with him. Now, our fines are $1.50 an hour, which was about $20 total when he called in the next day. He asked me if he would be fined. I knew him, so I was willing to waive his fine, but I couldn't tell him over the phone because he might come back at a time when I'm not working, and some of the other librarians are less lax about fines. So I tell him, currently your fine is $25, but if you bring it in, then we can discuss it further. I'm sure we can figure something out. He hangs up, and I assume he would be coming in. 2 days later, H comes waltzing up to my desk and sets a laptop charger down in front of me. The very same one he took home 3 days prior. I scanned it in and told them, you have an $85 fine on your account. What? It was $25 when I called. Well, that was 2 days ago. The fine is by the hour. You didn't tell me that. The fine info is taped to the side of the charger. I'll tell you what, I'll go ahead and waive everything but that first 25, alright? You'll just pay the fine you thought you'd pay. But the guy on the phone told me he would waive it. I didn't tell him that. I'm waiving $60, so you only have to pay $25. Well, I want to talk to your boss. Now, at this point, I should mention that we aren't strictly allowed to waive fines. It's just that the library can't tell the difference between a fine waived by a manager or just an employee. I was being generous. If I bring my manager in here, you'll just have to pay the whole fine. I want to talk to him. So I bring in my manager. After hearing the situation, my manager bluntly says, it's an $85 fine. Will that be cash or card? He stammered and walked out of the library. It's okay though. He just can't check out books or graduate until the fine is paid. I frequent a bar that's the last stop for people doing their free birthday drink run through 5 or 6 other places. Oftentimes people have only heard of 1 or 2 places on the run, so they go to the ones they've heard of, get the repetitive theme, gimmick drink, and then ask the bartenders about others. Once they've hit all the spots, they're pointed to the joint I mentioned originally. But it's different there. At that joint, the poor who asks for a free birthday drink is distracted while one bartender yells, "It's your birthday!" spins a yarn and mixes an overcomplicated random drink. The birthday yell cues anyone who's working to run behind the bar and fill pitchers with water. It also cues the regulars to get clear. Once the pitchers are full, the overcomplicated distraction drink is given to the poor. When Birthday Boy throws it back, he gets a minimum of 6 pitchers of water tossed on him. A gang of beard up dudes showed up doing the usual thing one night. Birthday Boy had frosting in his hair already, and one of his friends immediately ordered the free birthday drink. Definitely a deliberate setup. There were 8 guys working inside that night, which meant this was going to be 16 pitchers of water and from multiple angles. I noticed a couple on the other side of the support column that would definitely be in the splash zone. A woman just on the other side of it, and the guy she was with just on the other side of her. I said, "Hey, excuse me?" No response. It seems like she turned her head to look over but didn't acknowledge me. I tapped her on the shoulder and she turned around and snapped, "Ew, don't talk to me." She had her hand up in my face and everything. She said, "Ew," again, and then went to the other side of the guy, right next to the beard up Birthday Boy group. Well, okay. I looked to a security guy who saw the whole thing. He shrugged as if to say, "It's her own damn fault." And I just sat there, relative safely, on the other side of my column. A few seconds later, loud slaps of water, laughter and clatter of ice on the floor, and one really shrill shriek could be heard. My hands, up on the bar, and the bottoms of my drink got a little wet. No big deal. I stood up to wipe my hands on my thighs and made sure to make eye contact. Did that zipper across the lips gesture, gave her a thumbs up, and sat right back down. Didn't say a word, just like I was told. Her whole left side was soaked, hair flopped down, some kind of black makeup running down her cheek. Ha! I don't know if this is technically an MC, but it happened to my dad. He was one of 3 partners at one of his former companies, about medium size. One day, he and his company went to a company drinks. I don't think it was exactly a company party, but it was more an after-work drink at the pub. Anyway, the bar was serving aperitifs, and my dad asked for his without ice, as he hates ice tainting his drink. The landlord, who was behind the bar, refused and said that the ice was mandatory. So he served my dad's with ice. Dad accepted it, took the ice out, and laid it on the drain rack that goes underneath the beer drafts. The landlord ordered him to leave. My dad was half expecting it, but asked him to repeat himself. The landlord once again told him to leave. My dad said, okay, and started to leave. And his company all started to file out after him. The landlord protested, no, you don't all have to leave, only he has to leave. One of the other staffers said something along the lines of, sorry mate, he's the big boss, we all go where he goes. And so they all left, and went to another bar. They had made a reservation at the bar they were leaving, but they hadn't put down a deposit for it, and hadn't bought any drinks yet. The aperitifs had been complimentary, so the landlord didn't even get paid for those. So my friend Talon's dad died about 5 years ago. They got him cremated, so Talon has an urn with his dad's ashes in it. One of our teachers was mad at Talon about something, I'm not sure what, but the teacher demanded to meet Talon's father. He tried multiple times to tell our teacher that his dad was in fact dead, but Mr. McDonald wouldn't listen to him. So the next day, Talon shows up to school with his dad's urn and plops it on the teacher's desk and says, "You wanted to meet my dad? So here." I've never seen a teacher so mortified in my life. Edit, it's not that Mr. McDonald didn't believe him, it's that he didn't give the kid an opportunity to explain. He just kept interrupting him and sent him out. So about 2 months ago, I went to Cuba with my mother. It was an all-inclusive trip, so everything was pretty much provided for by Sunwing. Whenever I travel, I like to bring with me this cute 500ml glass water bottle with this rubber pink casing I got while I was in China. Normally, this wouldn't be an issue. There would be a few odd times when security at the airport would check it to make sure it was empty, because it was clearly over the 100ml maximum. But they would all let us go without a hitch. When we were traveling to Cuba, the bottle was checked and given back to us on our way there, but on the way back is a completely different story. There were tons of people flying out of Veredero, where we were, the same day as us, and we were like 200 people waiting to check in at only 3 check-in counters. When we finally checked in, it had been 2 hours since we got there. We were pretty tired from standing, so we wanted to get through the gates as fast as we could, so we took the shortest line in security. There were 2 people working at each bag check area. At ours, there was a lady looking through the screen, displaying the x-ray, and a guy in charge of checking suspicious bags. When we put our bags on the conveyor belt, the lady began gesturing to her partner and pointing at a screen. The guy then proceeded to grab my stuff off the belt and on the other side, and asked us if it was our stuff, to which we replied yes. He carefully shuffled through the bag, but really just went after the water bottle because it's what I assumed the lady pointed out on the screen. The following dialogue is my best recollection. Him: "Is this your water bottle?" "Yes." Okay, I'm going to confiscate this because it is against the rules to bring this on board. But it's empty. Yes, but it's over 100ml, and that's against the rules. Me, confused, but did not want to make a scene and get kicked out. No, that's for liquids. Him: "No, it's the size of the bottle, and it's glass. But we have this bottle that's also glass. This bottle indicates an 80ml bottle of hot sauce we bought." Him: "But that's under 100ml, so it's allowed." At this point, I wasn't sure if he didn't know the rules or something, because every time he answered, he sounded very unsure. Can I see where it states that I cannot bring an empty bottle over 100ml with me? And so he grabs a nearby plaque that labels prohibited items and points to a wine bottle. But that's not allowed because it's alcohol. No, it's because it's over 100ml glass bottle. His tone at this point indicated that his real intentions were that he wanted my water bottle because he's really just grabbing arguments out of thin air. I was just trying to test his nerves at this point. So if I had a 100ml glass bottle of alcohol, I could bring it with me? No, because it's alcohol. So it is that, referring to the plaque. "Do you want to take the cover off the bottle before it's sent to be destroyed?" Handing the bottle back to me for me to remove the casting. Keep in mind, there was some more bantering back and forth, basically saying the same thing over and over again. I was really pissed at this point. I really liked that water bottle, and it was clear the only reason he was confiscating the bottle was because he or the lady wanted it. I mean, I'm not sure if that's true, to be fair, like, he could just be an idiot. And so I took the water bottle from his hands. He gave it willingly to me for me to take the casing off, but since the only problem he seems to suggest is the size of the glass, I can take everything else. So I stared into his eyes as I removed the lid from the bottle and handed the rest back to him. His face instantly became red with anger, and he aggressively threw the rest into the disposal bin. I have no use for the cap or the casing, but he now has no use for the bottle, and that's all that matters. I told this story to a friend, and they said I should post it here. I used to work in publishing, and a part of my job was managing our company's social media accounts. When we were running a campaign for a specific book, we would supplement that campaign by tweeting about it. It usually had no provable impact on sales, but it would make the author happy. I was running a campaign for a big non-fiction author. Initially, I had no contact directly with the author, but drew up a social calendar which suggested content and timings, and I sent it through to the lead marketer. I heard nothing back, so I started tweeting as planned. I was then told by the lead marketer that the author wanted us to tweet more. I was happy to do that, but needed to balance that with the 20 other books we were publishing that week, so I suggested we do 2 more tweets at peak times, but that I would need some new content because tweeting the same message over and over again is not particularly effective, especially for non-fiction. Now at this point, the author found my work email address online and decided to email me directly. I then received 4 emails in 15 minutes, in all caps, badly spelled and bright red, I kid you not, telling me things that I was doing wrong. Apparently this author wanted to market his 800-page history book as a sensational, romance-filled family epic. We had included some marketing on this side, but we were still making it clear that it was a history book, not a fiction one. He wanted to skip that bit and mislead people into thinking it was historical fiction. The author proceeded to dictate 10 tweets that he wanted me to tweet that day. I went to ask the lead marketer if this was in line with her campaign, and she told me to do whatever he asked. In the time it took me to speak to the lead marketer, the author emailed me an additional 5 times, escalating massively each time and ultimately telling me he would get me fired if I didn't do this right now and post exactly what he wanted me to post. And so I did that. I posted each of his requested tweets exactly as he had sent them to me. None of them had links to purchase, none of them had images, several of them had spelling mistakes, and he consistently spelled his own Twitter handle wrong. When he complained, I forwarded the series of abusive emails he had sent to me to the head of marketing, and he was banned from ever communicating with marketing staff outside of his lead again. I did get a bit of side-eye, but I was told to just delete the tweets and ignore any further emails from him. Is a bruh moment. That's what we call a bruh moment in the field. I've been here since 10:30 this morning and still got another hour to go until someone replaces me. Please do not leave Toaster unattended at any time, okay? It gets scared, it can't be alone, you gotta hold its hand, okay? A few years ago, I bought a new shed/sunroof combination for my garden. It was pretty expensive, and thus I also paid for the company to build it. Knowing me, I would mess up and was happy to pay for a professional to come fix that for me. The shed has a roof with bitumen topping. It looked like very thick sandpaper. The professional builder tacked it in place, and that was that. I asked him if no glue would be needed to keep it in place, but obviously I know nothing, and that was a dumb question. Lo and behold, 6 weeks later, a mild storm blew off the entire bitumen topping on the roof. I called the company only to be told that I should have known this would be temporary, and these need to be changed like every year. Can you smell the bullshit? I replied that it's only been 6 weeks, and you need to come fix this. Nope, the storm was the reason for damage, act of God, with no help from them. Well, okay, they promised to send a new roll of bitumen so I could replace it myself. I waited. No bitumen. I went to their Facebook page to find lots of people complaining about similar stuff. I wrote a review warning people not to buy their expensive sheds as they get built wrong, and any damage resulting from this does not get resolved by them whatsoever. Mind you, the shed was over €1,000. Half an hour later, I get a phone call from said company. They tell me they will come the next day to put expensive shingles and make up for the damage at their own cost. But I do have to change my review. I waited for them to come fix it, and they held their promise. So did I. I wrote on their page about how they'd come fix my roof, even exchange the material for a much more expensive solution the very next day at their own cost. Needless to say, this caused a shitstorm of customers demanding the same solution. You're welcome, assholes.
Hey, Overwatch, can you tease us with a screenshot of a skin?
And then, you think you're clever? Mr. Play Overwatch, yeah, you think you're smart? A few years ago, I was on a flight from LA to Singapore. Takes about 16 plus hours. I'm a tall dude, around 6'3", so I don't fit very well in economy class seats. On most planes, my knees are often very close or right up against the seat in front of me. This makes it impossible for the person in front of me to recline their seats, which usually isn't a problem once the person in front of me sees how cramped I am in those tiny seats. However, for this particular flight, the man in front of me was not having it. He tried to recline his seat, but couldn't because my legs were there. He turns around to see what's happening and asks me something along the lines of, do you mind letting me put my seat back? I respond with, I wish I could, but I physically can't. I'll do my best to give you as much space as I can, but it won't be much. At this point, he starts to get angry and just starts pushing as hard as he can on the back of his seat. Needless to say, this was not particularly pleasant for me. I ask him to please stop, and he says, "I'll stop when I can put my seat back." I decide I'll just wait him out. He'll eventually get tired. After about 10 to 15 minutes of this, he calls a flight attendant over and proceeds to demand a new seat. The flight attendant tells him that there are no available seats and he'll have to deal with it. He demands to speak to the pilot. And so the flight attendant goes up to talk to the cockpit. Keep in mind that throughout this, he is pressing with all his might against my knees, with only short breaks to yell at the flight attendant. After a couple of minutes, the co-pilot, who wanted to speak to the pilot and wasn't happy about this, comes back and tries to explain to the man that he can't change seats because there are no other coach seats free. The man continues to demand a seat that is able to recline. "Give me an upgrade. This is unacceptable." He's making a scene, etc. The co-pilot finally gives in and says while looking at the man, "Sir, would you like to sit up in business class?" The man stands up and mutters something similar to, "F***ing finally." To which the co-pilot responds, "Sir, sit down. I wasn't talking to you." He turns to me and repeats, "How would you like to sit in business class?" I have, to this day, never seen someone as furious as the man when I walk past him to my new business class seat, with free drinks. Okay, that was a very satisfying read. I wish that was me though, to be fair. So I work in customer support for a mobile network provider. The way our company works is that after training, you enter a 1-month testing period where you answer phone calls under close supervision. At the end of the testing period, they either let you go or transfer you to a permanent position on one of the teams. I was a few days away from the end of the testing period when I got one heck of a phone call. I spent more than an hour on that one, and it hurt my final score at the end of the month. The customer told a tall tale about how she was trying to pay her debt to the company. She racked hundreds of shekels worth of debt in unincluded uses. The sales representative was rude to her and refused to let her pay, so she took a picture of him and left. The reason the call took so long is because she kept telling the story out of order, adding and changing details, and going on tangents and rants. It was very difficult to get the story straight. I felt like a detective trying to piece together the clues into what actually happened. Every time I read the story back to her chronologically, she added or changed something in the middle or went on a tangent about she's a polite British woman, and we shouldn't hire people like that representative to represent our company. Eventually, I got her to settle down on a version of what happened. I looked through the records and saw that according to the representative, who was a lot more concise than her, she was the one being rude, yelling at him in English, a language she barely spoke, and taking his picture without his consent. I didn't tell her that. I just politely instructed her on how to pay her debt via the phone. She sounded nervous, so I told her that until the debt is paid, I cannot make the changes in the account, including adding a report. So reluctantly, she gave me her credit card details, and the debt was paid in full. I reported on what she told me and moved it along to my superiors. A few days later, my testing period was over, and despite that tragedy of a call, I aced it and got transferred to the illustrious mail department, which is what I wanted. It's much more chill here, and I can work at my own pace, not having to rely on a customer or the supervisor to work faster. Also, I could take my breaks whenever I felt like it. Everything is fine for a couple weeks until I receive a new email telling me a familiar tale. It was an enraged recounting of the same story I'd heard on the phone, except much more elaborate, with more details I'd never heard before, such as the involvement of another person, or that the representative assaulted the customer by trying to impede the exit from the store. The customer complained that she'd been cheated and expected the representative to be fired, but she saw him again at the store and was outraged. She was under the impression that her paying her debt meant we will listen to her and fire the representative. The email ends with the following demands: fire the representative, reimburse her for the money we stole from her under false pretenses, and apologize to her in the form of extra compensation and a personal phone call from a high-ranking manager. If we did not comply, the police would get involved. So I complied with the second part, and we got the police involved. You see, while reading the email, I noticed that the address she emailed us from had a different surname than her account or the credit card information she provided. And lo and behold, the email was actually her real name, while the other details were fake. It turns out she was indeed a polite British woman. A British woman overstaying her visa for over a year now that was using a fake identity in Israel. As we discovered later, she was also wanted for numerous accounts of fraud where she didn't pay for services or claimed compensation for stories that later turned out to be false, just like she tried to do with us. We called the police, but they couldn't find her since the physical address she registered on our site was also fake, and so we called her back to the store to apologize personally. She gladly obliged, and the police were waiting for her. Neither I nor the representative she implicated were there that day, unfortunately. unfortunately, so we didn't get to see the look on her face. She was fined a hefty amount and then deported back to the UK. It was about 2 months after my 1-year anniversary at my last job. I caught a nasty flu around Christmas. I called into about the flu. They wouldn't accept emails even though I couldn't speak. On the 4th day, my work required a doctor's note. I didn't want to spend the $100 copay for a doctor to tell me rest and fluids. Luckily, I had a good general doctor, so when I called him, he sent me a PDF I could forward. It stated, Green's has the f***ing flu. He needs time off to recover and will come back when he is healthy enough. Greedence is not a grade schooler and should not need a doctor's note when he is sick. My VP tried to call me on when I would be back, but I kept directing her to the doctor's note.
I had an acquaintance who was part of a group of friends who always tried to do alpha male stuff to prove himself within the group when women were around. One thing he liked to do was when he arrived at the bar, he would grab your half-finished beer, drink it, then buy you a whole new one. I always shrugged this stuff off because this guy was obviously super insecure. One night we were hanging out and met a girl. I was really into her, but he was too. He was doing all his usual stuff, but I had a sense that the girl was more into me. I asked her if she wanted to leave the bar, and my friend overheard and took that as an invitation we should all leave together. We arrived at my place and he spots some peppers my roommate had left drying out to make salsa. They're called Aurora peppers and are some of the hottest peppers you can eat. The conversation went like this. What are those? Those are Aurora peppers. Can I have them? I wouldn't. They are extremely hot. It's okay. I'm South American. And he eats one. 30 seconds later, he's sputtering and trying to spit them out. He asked for milk, but all we had was expired milk. Poor guy. He drank it anyways, then immediately ran to the bathroom. While he was in there, the girl and I had a good laugh at his expense. I told her about how he's always trying to be alpha, and she laughed, mentioning things he'd done throughout the night that were super transparent. He came out of the bathroom saying he needed to go home right away, so he called a cab, went home, and I ended up hooking up with the girl.
Another one.
This happened a long time ago, 1990s, when I worked for a small, family-run print shop. A local politician used to fancy himself an artist and would draw local scenes in pen and ink. They were nothing special, but every year he'd treat his constituents to a Christmas card bearing a scrolled wintry scene, and inside would be a greeting from him and his family. This particular year, I was prepping his artwork when I noticed a problem with the text on the inside. As this was pre-internet, I figured it'd be quickest to recreate it myself, rather than bother the client to resupply. With hindsight, I should have copied his style as closely as possible, but the spacing looked awful, so he tweaked it here and there. He called in to check the proof. Hello, counselor. Here's your proof. I recreated the inside because I didn't get to finish my sentence. The counselor was so affronted that I felt his artwork could be improved upon that with a reddening face, he chewed me a new one and demanded that I use his original artwork like I was supposed to in the first place. Of course, counselor, my apologies. And so, the following week, the counselor received his Christmas cards exactly as instructed, and the greeting read, Merry Christmas, P.S. That's it for the malicious compliance part, but it's not quite the end of the story. A week or two later, I was in a card shop looking for funny cards to send to family and friends when I spotted one that made me gasp. On the front was a kid wearing a dunce's cap, writing the following, Happy Christmas, Happy Christmas, Happy Christmas, and on the inside, Merry Xmas. I couldn't resist. I bought it to show my boss, and he thought it was so funny he actually sent it to the counselor. Happy Christmas from all at local printers. We lost a customer, but it was worth it. This was one of a few instances which ultimately got my boss fired. The new head coach at the school I had been coaching at for 5 years demanded that she be the only one to mark the roll before all 100 or so kids went off into their respective groups for the afternoon. She snapped anytime anyone else would try to mark it. She was also bullying one of my colleagues and really let her have it when she marked the roll on a separate occasion. One day, a kid forgot something in their locker and asked to be escorted by our head coach to get whatever it was. So at the beginning of class, around 3:15 p.m., all of the kids were looking at us, the coaches, and getting antsy, waiting for something to happen. My boss didn't tell anyone what she was doing. We thought she went and moved her car or something, that she was taking her sweet time. Since I had been working there the longest out of all the coaches, the others were asking me if we should start and if I could mark the rolls. I told them in a very sarcastic and evil tone, we have to follow her instructions. Let's wait and see how she copes with her own F-up. My boss returns at about 3:25 and sees everyone just standing there and proceeds to ask us, what happened? We are late for class. Come on, chop chop. I kindly reply, we followed your rule. We can't start without you marking the roll. She gives me this look. I'll mark the roll while the kids are warming up then. Meanwhile, all the kids are hastily running to where they need to be and the whole gym looks super disorganized. We get the warm-up underway, and while kids are running back and forth doing kicks and turns, etc. This is an artistic gymnastics class, by the way. She is walking in between the rows, almost getting kicked in the face and asking who's here and who's missing, etc. And all my students are looking at me like, WTF is this bee doing? All the while, the head of sport was watching from above in the sports staff room, watching this bee crash and burn. She was fired at the end of her 3rd term at the school. I'm now applying for the head coach role. Fingers crossed that I get it. Well, seeing as you follow the rules to the T, I'm sure you'll get the position, my friend. I was a head lifeguard at a water park for 4 years, so I have definitely seen my fair share of entitled parents. But one entitled mother almost let her child drown because of it. Me is me, supervisor is supervisor, EM is entitled mom, C is child. At the park I work at, we have a bunch of slides, a wave pool, and one regular swimming pool that has these little plastic water slides that empty into it that we also use for training. The shallow end is about 3 feet and the deep end is 10, but the water slides empty into the 4/5 foot end. A lot of people underestimate the depth, mostly parents and young children, and find themselves having to swim back up the wall instead of standing. I'm only 5'2", so even I have to swim from that side. Because of the depth, we require everyone under 48 inches to wear a life jacket no matter where they are in the pool, state law. As you can imagine, a lot of parents aren't happy with this, and though we have free life jackets as a courtesy on very busy days, we run out. But our biggest issues come from the parents who are convinced their child is the next Michael Phelps. On this particular day, it was fairly busy, and I'd enlisted a couple of my lifeguards to look for life jackets that were left in the cabanas/bathrooms/etc. instead of hung back up. A little kid came running to the pool and I noticed his height, about 2 inches too short. Poor little guy. Hey, buddy! I'm so sorry, but you can't swim in this pool without a life jacket. Entitled mother walking up behind him. Oh, it's alright, he can swim. Unfortunately, because of the state law, I can't let him in the water without a life jacket. He's on the swim team, he's perfectly fine. I'm sorry, ma'am, it's not our rule, it's law. She rolls her eyes and huffs off, but manages to find her kid a life jacket. So I take my eyes off them and pay more attention to my zone. Regular irritated parent, no big deal. Fast forward about 10 minutes and I see this kid climb up the slide. It's the child, so I whistle at him and take him to his mother and again say, Ma'am, I understand he can probably swim, but he cannot go down the slide or go in the pool without a life jacket. Absolutely not. I am not putting that death trap back on my child. I understand, but he can swim perfectly fine. He's on a swim team. He's fine. Me, beginning to get irritated, I legally cannot let your child touch that water if he does not have a life jacket on. No, it was choking him. I will not have my child choking and dying. Goodbye. I almost cracked up, but she'd walked off, dragging her kid with her. So I rolled my eyes and didn't think anything of it. Every 20 or 30 minutes, we'd rotate positions as lifeguards to keep our eyes fresh and our energy up. So our lovely entitled mother decided to wait until we rotated to try and bring her child back. Unfortunately for her, I'd just moved to the other side of the pool. About 10 minutes into the rotation, I noticed a distressed swimmer, swimming, but clearly struggling and barely moving. It's the stage before active drowning, about 5 feet from the slide. I whistle, jump in, and yank the swimmer onto my tube, and lo and behold, it's the same child. Now, I'm mad, but not as mad as entitled mother. She's sitting in a lounge chair on the side of the pool, not paying attention at all. Side note, parents, lifeguards are not your babysitters. I help the kid out and drag him to his mother. Ma'am, this is the 3rd time I've tried to talk to you. Your child almost drowned in the pool because he, entitled mother, horrified. Did you just touch my child? I rescued your child. I did not give you permission to save my child. You had no right to touch him. You should have asked me first before just grabbing him like that. I didn't see you anywhere. You were not watching your child. So I had to make a decision. Yes, I was. He was swimming fine. How dare you save him just to prove your point? Just admit you're on a little lifeguard power trip. I want to speak to your supervisor. I love when people want to speak to a supervisor because at this water park, they are almost always on the lifeguard's side. So my supervisor comes over. This lifeguard won't let my child swim in the pool. She gave him a life jacket that was choking him, and then she dragged him out of the pool without my permission. Your child is too short, but he's on a swim team. If he can swim, he shouldn't have to wear one. Now, I'd been having this same conversation over and over for about 45 minutes. My supervisor asked her to give him a minute and move to the side to talk to me. Sometimes, if the children are near the correct height, we let them swim if there are no adequate life jackets and these seem like strong swimmers, and have a reliable adult with them. So my supervisor decides to extend this privilege to entitled mother. Thank you. I can't believe it took this long for you to see sense. I hope she gets written up at the very least for ruining my son's day. She was doing her job, but I'm sorry it made things difficult for you. Entitled mother goes back to chatting with her friends and her son runs happily back to the slide, where he nearly drowned once already, and slides down it. And sure enough, he starts drowning. But I'm not allowed to rescue her son because he can swim, right? He's on a swim team. He's great. I'm actually about to jump in when my supervisor stops me and gets the mom's attention. Ma'am, your son is drowning. Entitled mother rolling her eyes and walking over to the edge of the pool. He is not. His swimming is fine. By this point, the son has moved from distressed swimming to active drowning. It's awful. The imagery of a mother walking over to the son who's actively trying to grasp for anything to survive and not have his lungs filled with water, and the mom's like, yeah, no, he does this at the swim meet. He's fine. What's the problem? His mouth is bobbing up and down over the water. His eyes are wide, arms desperately grabbing for something, but he isn't moving anywhere. And no, none of the other patrons noticed because they were all doing their own thing, and drowning is very quiet and uneventful. Now I'm getting antsy. I don't want a kid drowning on my watch, even if I don't have permission from the parent to rescue them. Entitled mother's friend comes over to see what's going on, gets wide-eyed, and gasps. And the entitled mother falls into hysterics. What are you doing? Don't just stand there. Do something. Save him. Despite my now anger, I need no second bidding. I jump in, grab the poor kid for a second time, and pull him out. Please put a life jacket on him next time, or take him to the children's area where he can swim wherever he likes without one. Didn't even say thank you, just shot me a dirty look, signed the incident report, and hauled her shivering child away. As I have mentioned in other posts, Tales from Retail, I have worked better than 30 years in convenience stores, and boy, the stuff I have seen and endured. However, this story is about malicious compliance, so let's get to it. I had worked for this particular chain of stores for a while and had learned many of the ins and outs of fixing minor problems to keep the store running. Printer stopped working? Let me check the wiring. Ha! Problem solved. Door sticking? I got this. Anyway, I'm tightening the hinges on a door one day when my manager catches me. Now, technically, we, the store employees, are not supposed to fix anything. If it required maintenance of any kind, we were supposed to call it in and let the maintenance guys handle it, so the manager yelled at me for fixing the door. AJ, what are you doing? Fixing the door because it was sticking? No, we're supposed to call it in, not fix it ourselves. But manager, it's just some loose screws. Look, it took 5 minutes. I don't care, we're not supposed to fix anything. We call it in, period. So I can't fix anything. Not even simple stuff? No, nothing. Just call maintenance. If I catch you fixing anything again, I'm going to write you up. You realize that it can take days for them to respond for simple things like the door sticking. She nodded. Okay, whatever you say. I stopped making repairs. Every time something broke, I filed a repair order, including things like wood trim breaking or a squeaking door. I didn't touch a thing. Maintenance got very tired of seeing our store number pop up on their computer, and the maintenance guy asked why I didn't just fix some of them since they were very simple repairs or did not really need a maintenance call. Manager said I had to report any repair, no matter how large or small, or I could be wrote up, so sorry. The final straw was when the coffee pot sprang a leak. Our coffee pots were hooked up to the main water supply, so when one of them started leaking, it didn't stop, just kept slowly dribbling water. I, as I was told to do, made a maintenance request, stamped that emergency, and placed some towels to stop the spread of water. I did not shut off the water, which would have been easy, because I was told not to fix anything. I told manager that the pot was leaking and that I had called maintenance. She came out of her office, saw the water still spreading, and turned to me in exasperation. Why is it still leaking? Because it is a maintenance issue and I am not to touch it per your orders. You could have turned off the water, which she proceeded to do. Nope, sorry, but you said I could get wrote up, so I am not touching anything maintenance related. She glared at me for a full minute before replying, "This is different. Leaving the water run could cause significant damage, so it's okay to shut it off." Nope, not running the risk since you threatened to write me up. I'm not touching a thing even remotely connected to maintenance. I was transferred to a sister station in town 2 weeks later for some reason. I also went back to fixing minor issues with no problems from my new manager. So I work IT in a public school. I'm a 12-month employee who works 40 hours a week, 5 days. I'm constantly staying late, sometimes an hour or more, or coming in early. I don't get any overtime, but sometimes the job calls to be late. No big deal in my eyes. I get a half-hour lunch, salaried at $55K. Most days I bring my lunch in, but sometimes I don't have leftovers or anything to bring in. There's a convenience shop that sells sandwiches and chips, which I usually go to whenever I don't bring in lunch. Since the sandwiches are made by order, you don't have an option to call in, so you have to wait for it. It takes around 12 or 13 minutes to get there and back. So, before my break, lunch is at 12 noon every day, I'll run to the shop, get a sandwich and Coke before my lunch break, and come back in time for lunch. Now, this isn't every day, it's pretty rare, maybe twice a month. My boss knows I stay late and never ask for OT or anything like that. He told me staying late was part of my job when necessary. I usually don't have an issue with him, but today I did. I ran out at 11:45, got a sandwich, came back and took lunch from 12 to 12:30. When I was just getting off my lunch, he called me into his office and asked what time I went on lunch. Told him what time, then he asked me if I ran out before my break. Told him I did. He told me he was writing me up for stealing time for running out before my break. This is strange, considering this has never been a problem and I've never gotten a write-up. So I tell him that's fine, and he has to do what he has to do. Then I decide to look at my contract. Guess what? I get 2 15-minute breaks in my addition to my half-hour lunch. So now, I'll be taking a 15-minute break whenever I feel like it. Thanks to my union. It's 1994 and I'm in 8th grade, 13 years old, at a private religious school that had some very interesting rules. One of which was that we were not allowed to bring meat to school. They had some other really weird views on things like medicine, if that gives you some idea of the religion. Neither myself nor my family subscribed to the school's religion, but it happened to be the best private school in the area, and I was having some issues of bullying in public school, so this is where I landed. A little background. I have blood sugar issues that have since become more manageable, but due to the dietary restrictions and general rules of this school, I was not allowed to eat as often or as nutritiously as was necessary in order for me to maintain myself throughout the day, and as such, I was often irritable, and before long I was labeled a troublemaker. One Thursday afternoon in spring, I had a particularly bad blood sugar episode after gym class, and had to be sent to the nurse. Quotations used because although she had basic medical training, it was only enough to placate the school's insurance. And per their religion, she did absolutely nothing but allow one to lie down and pray until they felt better. I straight up passed out, like for the rest of the school day. I was actually stirred back to consciousness by the sound of my mother screaming bloody murder at the principal, nurse, and a receptionist about 30 feet and 3 walls away. However motivating the ruckus was, I could not pull myself off the infirmary cot. My mother had to carry me out to the car and drive me to the emergency room for emergency rehydration. I did not return to the school on Friday, prompting my best friend Craig to call and check on me. I told him what happened and he said he had a plan. Cue malicious compliance. The following Monday we had gym in the morning. The school was a K through 12 gym, so our gym class hours would switch with the younger classes depending on the weather. On this particular day we were doing timed mile runs. Now, I've always been a gangly dude with an above average stride, so my average mile time was pretty good. Low 5s, which isn't bad for a 13-year-old. But today I decided to push myself and see if I could come in under 5. Edit, I did not run the mile in under 5 until several years later. That was just included in order to give you an idea of how much time we had. I was one of the first to finish, with Craig coming in close behind. We went to the grass to relax, and Craig pulls something out of the waistband of his shorts. It was his mom's credit card. He then tells me that his dad's cell phone, uncommon in 94 but not unheard of in his dad's line of work, is in his gym locker. We ask for permission to go change for lunch, since the run is all we're doing today. The gym teacher says yes, and we haul ass to the locker room. We get to the locker room and begin to enact our plan. Craig calls Pizza Hut and orders a large meat lover's pizza to be delivered to us at school. The school has strict but ambiguously written rules about students conducting financial transactions on school grounds, so we used the credit card to pay for the pizza over the phone so no money changed hands on the property. Fast forward 25 minutes, Craig and I are sitting in the cafeteria with our friends, the two of us not eating. Enter Pizza Hut guy who, thankfully, seemed intrigued by what happened. Imagine you're a pizza guy called to a school cafeteria with a single pizza. Every eye in the room was on this guy as he awkwardly said, louder than normal talking but still kind of sheepishly, "I have a large meat lovers for a Craig M." Craig and I look at each other and leap up, run up to Pizza Hut guy, and Craig says, "I'm Craig M, that's for me." He then shows Pizza Hut guy the credit card used to place the order, and Pizza Hut guy seems okay with this. At this moment, the principal, hereafter known as PC for Principal Cocksucker, comes running out of his office, just as Craig and I lift the lid on the box to inspect the pizza before taking it from Pizza Hut guy. PC gets hit full on the face with a wave of hot meat fumes and absolutely loses his mind, slapping the pizza box closed and sending it to the floor, thankfully unharmed. Craig and I were taken by the air to the office where we were told to wait for our parents. My mother arrived about 15 minutes later, absolutely furious that she had to leave work, and Craig's dad, who had been at home waiting for the phone to ring, arrived a couple of minutes later. The conversation that followed went about like this. "Your boys violated the rules and are subject to expulsion." What exactly did they do? "They brought meat to school and conducted a financial transaction on school grounds." Didn't you say they had it delivered? Well, yes, but what does that have to do? So they didn't bring it, then? Well, they had it brought. That's the same thing. Show me the student handbook. Lo and behold, it doesn't say anything about being brought meat at school, only bringing it ourselves. One down. That still doesn't excuse the financial transaction rule. How was the pizza paid for? I assume it was cash, since neither of these boys are old enough to have a credit card. See, that's where you're wrong. I gave Craig a credit card in case of emergencies. Name one instance in which ordering a pizza is an emergency. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't OP hospitalized last week for blood sugar-related exhaustion and dehydration? That's confidential school information, and actually, Craig is my best friend, so he knows all about it. He even called me over the weekend to check on me. Did you? No, he didn't. No one from the school did. That was the principal stammering, if you didn't know. I have wasted enough of my time here today, and I'm starting to think I've wasted enough of my money here overall. You want to expel my kid? Fine. I'll pull all 4 of my kids out. Now you're losing 5 tuition checks a month over pizza and some kids who apparently know your rules better than you do. My mom nods in agreement and we stand up to leave. PC ended up backpedaling hard and we got off without any repercussions. To put the cherry on our day, Craig's dad pointed out the rule about finishing your entire lunch or getting into trouble, and since you kept these boys in the office for their entire lunch period, you had to give them the opportunity to follow the rules like everyone else. So Craig and I got to sit in the cafeteria by ourselves for an entire period eating our now cold Victory Pizza. So a bit ago I used to work in healthcare. We were allowed to work up to 55 hours a week, and so I'd usually pick up around 3 to 4 extra shifts a month just to pay for treats and extras. I always made sure I never did too many hours and that I felt well in myself. Until a new senior nurse started from elsewhere in the hospital, she was quite brittle with all the staff, bringing in arbitrary new rules and just generally being rude until she wanted something. Then her tone changed and she was sweetness and light. She started telling staff that picked up more than 1 extra shift a month that they were doing too many hours and that we had to pick up fewer hours as it didn't reflect well on the department to have permanent staff working so much. She said this in the most condescending tone possible. I tried explaining the policy of the hospital, but she didn't listen. Just said, "Well, I'm the senior nurse on this ward and this is how it is now." And to be honest, it wasn't worth my while just working 1 extra shift, so I stopped. I also stopped staying behind to help, as long as I wasn't impacting on patient safety or others apart from her. Got loads of notes to write? Too bad, I'm finished now. See you later. Got some samples from pharmacy? Think you'll be running those yourself. It all came to a head one day as I was getting ready to leave. She asked me to work a shift the next day. She said that she'd ask a staffing agency, but they couldn't send anyone and no one else wanted to pick up shifts. Then came the sweetness. "Please, OP, please. Otherwise, I'll have to do it and I'm meant to be going to XYZ tomorrow." I stopped. I smiled. I just said, "Well, I can't do too many hours, and you are the senior nurse," and left. Funnily enough, she never questioned me picking up shifts again.